Hello and welcome to yet another CNBC Africa debate, deliberating on current issues affecting the country and sometimes the region. We'll see how exactly this ripples across the border. Coming up on the show, the much deliberated, much talked about, much anticipated August 4th elections here in Rwanda. I'll be your host over the next couple of minutes. I'm George Ndirangu, or at George Ndirangu on Twitter. Today I'm not alone, joined by Arnold Segawa. Ordinarily we don't talk politics, but given the timing, we have to toe a fine line between politics and business. Who better to give us perspective on this than our panelists for today? We have Francine Havugimana on my extreme right next to Arnold. And of course on my right, Lonzen Rugira, who's a researcher in public policy. So we'll be bouncing the questions back and forth to get a sense on how conducive the environment is and how prepared we were even as we lead to the decision that most Rwandans will make. Plain and simple, the choice is between Frank Habineza of the Green Party. We have the independent candidate, Philippe Mpayimana, and of course the incumbent Paul Kagame of the RPF. Many observers expect a landslide victory, which leads us now to our first question. I'll bring that to you, Lonzen. You get to take the heat since you're seated right next to me, and I know Arnold has some that he'd like to fire at you as well. We saw the votes given 93% 7 years ago. Will it be higher than in 2003 when he got 95%? Will it be higher than the results that we saw in the referendum? What are we anticipating, even as most observers or analysts talk about a landslide victory?
Well, yeah, it will be a landslide, of course. It will be higher than the last election, and I think it will be somewhere around the numbers of the referendum. I expect 97, 98%. Yeah.
All right, 97 to 98, heavy numbers.
Yeah.
All right. Given that now, before we throw now to just get a sense of the environment or the investment climate currently, 98% is a clear indication. We even saw the numbers that were amassed during the rallies, but we'd like to know. Of course, the candidates were selected carefully, and we had aspirants who did not make it to the cut. The ones who made it had the reason why they got there. They have their manifestos. Some are relevant, some are applicable. What will now be the role or synergy we'll see between the independents and the Green Party now into the RPF, if any?
I think that if I was the RPF, I would give them a role. And the reason I would give them a role is because of the way they've conducted themselves throughout the election. And this is the first election in Rwanda where we have not had ethnic undertones. And actually it helps to explain why it's so much peaceful. Because before, the role of ethnicity in African electoral politics has been to really rile up people, to get them excited, and sometimes turns into violence. So now these politicians have played by the rule book, and they've really attempted to sell their manifesto to the public, and I think that's commendable. And for that, I think if I was the RPF, I would be very positive towards them.
If at all you're looking at it from that end, among the candidates, how would you spread the economic policy? What actually stands out for you? Yes, we know what RPF is capable of. We have seen them in the past 7 years. But if you actually do break down the independent Mpayimana and, of course, Frank Habineza from the Green Party, what actually stood out for you from the two?
There's no substantive difference in terms of the manifestos. And the reason there are no substantive differences are there as well. And the key reason is that they are forced to play within the requirement of a policy-oriented campaign. That's very difficult. And the reason it is difficult is because they have to do the opposition research. So this requires a lot of human resource. So the intellectual capacity and the investment necessary to put together that kind of package to sell to the public is very difficult. Now, I've talked about the fact that that is why politicians during electoral season, they turn to ethnicity, because it doesn't require them to make that kind of investment. But now they're forced to do that, make that investment, yet they've not had the resources in place. They have not had the manpower in place, the staff. They really don't have a strong basis upon which they can build this opposition research and really present a very competitive manifesto. So as a result, the manifestos are not competitive.
Right. Francine, maybe to just bring you into the conversation, you're, of course, at the helm of the Private Sector Foundation here in Rwanda. The last 7 years, what has it been like? And if at all, at the helm of the RPF, what could be some of the considerations that they could tweak coming into the next 7 years, if at all, if and when the RPF is re-elected?
Yeah, thank you. I think we are on a good track as private sector. We started very far, if I can say, like in 1999, that's when it started Rwanda Private Sector Federation. Mm-hmm. And it was a long time after genocide where we started. We used to have Chamber of Commerce, and then from there we started in 1999. It was like a quick startup where we have a lot of people trying to see how they can start and build themselves. And we had a lot of businesses, local businesses, mm-hmm. and without having international businesses among our members at that point. But if you can see today where we are having a lot of companies, international companies, member in our private sector, and we are having even our private sector members being members in other private sector outside the country because they are doing business there. Yeah. They are exporting, they have been opening some branches in different countries. So we are growing, which is a good startup, if I can say, because we are also starting another wing of business. We used to be local, now we are trying to imagine international business. It's not very easy, but we have to make it. So, as you have been asking me, for the next 7 years, we are expecting more business outside the country.
That is actually the next step, outside Rwanda.
We want to focus more on outside country because we want to get more business from export than import. When you are focusing on local business, sometimes you are intending to have more import. But when we focus outside the country, you are going for export. So now private sector, we are more focusing on export. You have seen that we are moving outside the country as a team. Mm-hmm. We are trying to go everywhere and try to see how we can learn from them, how we can start building business together with all those countries and start something strong which can help Rwanda as a group or as a team from private sector.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, let me just jump in there because you mentioned about bringing in or scaling in those huge companies from outside. Of course, we've seen that with the foreign direct investments. Now, a few years ago, I couldn't ask you this question because energy and water was still government, but now it's privatized, so I can ask you that within the private sector. We still have the basic services that are wanting. We have water, a recurrent issue on social media, energy, electricity, a recurrent issue on social media. We'd like to know, in the event that the RPF is re-elected and the chairman gets back, the incumbent is now the next president, the deliberate solution to those particular issues, basic services.
Myself, as a Rwandan, I trust what he has been telling us, that he's going to double effort. So, which means that what we are facing today is seen by everyone, as you are saying. But when you are growing, there's a process. You just come from where we used to have companies under government. Now they are becoming private. So there's a struggle between that transition. But when they will be fully private, they will start thinking as a private company. How business people are thinking just to satisfy the customers. So I think from there we don't have any issue because we can even have more companies coming in. If we are having a private company, it means that even myself, if I can have capacity to bring that same service, I can be on board and sell what they are selling. Right. So I think with competition, people will start opening eyes. People will start having like, we remember what happened with MTN when they started here. For the start point, we were having a lot of challenges, but they could not even pay back the community. But if we can see today, where we have MTN, Tigo, Airtel, when we are having any challenge in our communication, right, they have to report. And sometimes they are paying back some small amount. I can see in my phone when they're sending like, yesterday you didn't have your bundles, so you are giving back. Right. It used to be like that.
So Francine has alluded to the conversation on the foreign direct investments, and of course, which leads us now to conversation on observers. We had this conversation right before, and this has been a recurrent topic over the last couple of months. We have the EU observers who say they will now not be observing. We have African observers. But here's our point. Most of the people who are observing from an external point of view are normally the mirror for the investors in their respective countries. They tell them the environment is conducive, like you've been saying, you can now bring your money here. But we also have now, it trickles into the politics of certain countries. So where are we drawing a balance between observing and interference?
Yeah. Before I answer your question, let me just quickly, the issue of access to basic services. Water, for instance. Water is a very serious concern of especially Kigali residents. But this did not come up in the manifestos of the opposition. Yes. Nobody's talking about water. And it tells you the serious deficiency in the opposition trying to access political power. If you cannot address the most pressing issue and you seek power, I don't understand the vehicle through which you want to get that power.
But Lonson, if I could just
yes,
jump in there. Again, in the defense of the Democratic Green Party, Frank Habineza, he does put food security, quote unquote, as #1 priority for him. Now, he does say food security, and the other thing that he's very, very keen on is increasing the wages for the security forces. Now, in his view, they are underpaid, yet they're keeping the country very safe. They are not even beyond the country, they are also in Somalia. Isn't there any credit to be given for him, who is actually looking at the drought that is ultimately affecting the inflation of the country, yes, and having a strong effect on the Rwandan franc itself, ultimately?
Habineza is to be credited in raising some issues, but he's raising peripheral issues. I just talked about the issue of access to water. Right. This is specific. It's very clear. There's no need to go broad talking about food sufficiency, because water is specific. It may be food, but there's no need to go broad. Be clear. We have a problem of water, and I'll address it this way. Give me your confidence. The RPF has failed to deliver water to you. I will deliver it. And go to the next issue. Next issue. Now, there is a lot of populism that has come with some of his suggestions that he's bringing up. So either he's piggybacking on the RPF's manifesto when he talks about, instead of providing people with 1 cow per poor family, I'll give them like 1 goat or pigs, you know? Yeah, I mean, that's the same thing. Right. Yeah, so you're piggybacking, you're just substituting. Yeah. So now, actually, he's better off looking at the 1 cow per poor family program and looking at the deficiencies in the execution of the program. He's better off that way, and promise that if I come in, actually he can, if he were to recognize the importance in fighting poverty that the 1 cow per poor program is, and then come in to offer a solution that if I'm in power, I'll execute better than the RPF, despite the fact it has a good idea of fighting poverty. But the populism is taking him away from the weaknesses of RPF. True. Now, going to your question about balancing interference, and there is a broader ideological issue at play here. And that ideological issue is whether Africans should be superintended upon. Right. And if Africans do not take observers to observe American, French, British elections, why should they expect to observe African elections? Right. So there's a very ideological issue about whether Africans need to be held by the hand to cross the road. Now that is being fought, but it's being fought in guerrilla terms. It's not seen out here. Yeah, so when we talk about why the EU did not come to Rwanda, we have to be cognizant of the guerrilla warfare taking place underneath. Yeah. And now, why did they not come? My understanding is that they want to go somewhere where there is friction, there is expected to be violence, and then they can observe, because then they are really mediators. Who is done what, under what circumstances, then they can substantiate their presence. In Rwanda, they cannot. So it makes sense that they shouldn't come.
Well, what about the Green Party candidates, Frank Habineza's claims that the judiciary system might be compromised, and that's why they need external observers? Is that a valid sentiment?
But he has to substantiate also the claim why the judiciary might be compromised. Secondly, the role of the judiciary comes in should there be a disagreement about who has triumphed.
Right.
There is likely not to be that. Therefore, the question is a mute issue.
Is putting the...
Again, maybe just feeding into that question, and I want both of you to maybe comment on this one. Frank Habineza, at least when I interviewed him, he was very keen on one issue, besides the food security. The other one was a need for a constitutional court in Rwanda.
Yes.
Right now, you only have a Supreme Court, and if at all one needs to appeal a ruling, it is the Supreme Court. There is no constitutional court in the country, and this needs to be maybe put to better, someone to actually debate the issue. And this is something that he actually wants to debate. And I want to hear from maybe someone from the private sector. Maybe there needs to be someone to look over the Constitution vis-a-vis the Constitutional Court, and maybe also yourself, Lonson.
Myself, I don't know what I'll be answering on that, because I'm not good. However, I did law, but I'm not good in constitution.
Constitutional law, okay.
I didn't have time to analyze all details in constitutional law.
Yeah.
But I think I would like to come back to what you have been mentioning on water supply. It's a challenge, as he mentioned. But if you can see how the population are growing, starting by Kigali. Myself, there I'm talking as a business person. If I was the owner of that company and ready to supply the city, growing on daily basis, it has to be a challenge, because infrastructure, the way they are designed, we are using old infrastructure. We need to renew most of them, but we are renewing building, and some owners of building like myself, if I renew my building, sometimes I forgot that I should renew even pipes. And the connection starts from Yanze. I don't know. I know that is very far from here, but from Yanze to Kigali, I'm having a hotel. Sometimes, I'm suffering with water, but if I can see the population, the growth of the population, I can sense that we need to have a lot of input, as he mentioned, and I think as all of us, we can see that the city are becoming more smarter than 7 years back. I think they are going to put more effort on that, and make sure that people we have, because that's essential for someone who are coming to invest in the country, and we are attracting more investors, especially in building some commercial building. They need a lot of water. Hotels, they need a lot of water. Even housing, affordable housing, we need to have water up to there. So I think it will be key priority. Starting by that, I wanted just to highlight that the growth of the population are also going up every day. So controlling that and making sure that you are adapting the growth of WASAC and the population all over the country, I see that there's a little bit a challenge. And I don't know what about the budget? He didn't mention the budget, because sometimes we are facing some challenges in between budget, and to make, I don't know how much it will cost, but I sense that it's a lot of money. If you can see that we have kept talking about this, but they are trying, but I don't know how much the government are putting there, that we can even sense the small change. So, but I know that they are putting a lot of money.
Right. Well, we're definitely sure it's not a one day conversation, but definitely something that we should be following up on. Alonso, there was a question that was posed regarding the court system.
I followed the conversation on one of the TV shows, and that argument seemed to make sense on Habineza's part. The problem is that when he articulates that argument, logical as it is, he disregards the broader reforms taking place in the Ministry of Justice. Yeah, the entire justice infrastructure, the entire system framework is being reformed. You are introducing the Rwanda Investigation Bureau. They are introducing a new appellate court so that the cases that go to the Supreme Court are reduced, and I think it's in line with his logic. The specificity of the introduction of the Constitutional Court now falls within that spirit of reform. And Habineza is in the consultative forum of political parties. Policies pass through that consultative forum. And as I told you, his proposal seems to make sense. It's logical. However, it needs to come within the reform sequence, and I think that he will have gained a lot of traction from the elections, the way he has conducted himself, like I said. And I think that if he brings up this proposal in the consultative forum, it may gain the results that he desires.
Now, we're about to go for a short break, but we'd just like to reel in what was mentioned earlier in regards to the budget. We haven't seen the other candidates come in strongly about it, saying, okay, this part has been apportioned improperly. They're still not clear about that, and that is a common concern. But one thing that has been noted is that the budget is, in itself, the budget for the elections was the cheapest on the continent. We're seeing a lot of things that have not been over budgeted as with other countries. We'll talk about other countries, but probably you could just give us that parting shot. How deliberate do you think such measures are, given the fragility of our economy currently?
The challenges of not bringing the financial matters in the manifesto are in line with the challenges I began with, the technical deficiencies of the political parties. And the financial governance is the most technically elevated, highest level in terms of this discourse that's taking place. So we talk about the tax reforms, we're talking about accountability measures, reporting, standardizing to international standards. So these require technical abilities. Right. Now, because they face a general deficiency, they are not able to articulate the challenges in financial governance that are taking place in Rwanda in ways that they should be challenged. I think they're avoiding it intentionally.
All right.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect. Arnold, you'll allow us to go for a short break, but when we return, we'll touch on one word that Alonso has been very keen on, neoliberalism, where we are seeing the economic and political structure being in favor of the private sector, of course, for profit, not owned by state. So we'll get a sense on whether the private sector thinks that would be the way forward, or how exactly we should go about it, given the current constitution of businesses owned by government and private sector in Rwanda. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our CNBC Africa debate on the August 4th elections, a much anticipated conversation on what exactly will be the way forward after Rwanda decides. I'm sure you've been seeing the hashtag. I've been your host for the last couple of minutes. If you've missed the first half of the show, not to worry, we have another half hour to go. I'm George Ndirangu, joined by Arnold Segawa.
Good to be here, George, and thanks again for that introduction. On the panel, of course, is Ms. Francine Havugimana, who happens to be the Vice Chairperson for the Private Sector Federation here in Rwanda. And on my left, Alonso Rugira, who is, among other things, he wears a lot of hats. Besides
research and public policy for today.
We'll go with that for today. Alonso, now I want to bring you in on maybe our first question for this half. 11 political parties in Rwanda, but when it came to the elections, 9 of them actually did come to support or merge. with the incumbent political party, which is, of course, the Rwanda Patriotic Front. Tell me, what does this mean for the opposition, let alone the political climate of Rwanda as a whole?
Well, it is somehow expected and it is intended somehow. And the reason is that Rwanda's approach to politics is consensual, consensus building, and it is actually in the constitution. The constitution requires, it is a multi-party dispensation, but within a consensual framework. So they've been working together for a long time, and they've decided to continue to work together. So by design of the political system, it is expected that it is not unexpected. How about that? and the fact that Habineza is going it alone, some have called it courageous, but I think it is a misnomer, because there's no, what is the courage? You know, because courage comes if you're afraid of something. Who is afraid of anything? You know, right. And but it is good that Habineza is going it alone. It's good that we have an independent candidate, and what they do is that they are able to identify or put some pressure on the coalition, and that pressure, I think, is necessary, because they're able to articulate some things. Like we've talked about, they may seem populist on critical examination, but the fact that they're being talked about may put some pressure on the RPF to do something once it gets in power. But I also think over the long term, Habineza is likely to be absorbed inside. Yeah, I think so too.
Right. It's a bit unfair to probably pit Rwanda against a different country, but of course we have the August 8th elections in Kenya, and I have to bring that in to just give a comparison on the same. The opposition in Kenya is not a toothless lion. I mean, whatever they say, they put to the streets. Of course, a lot of things that are not replicable here. But what do you make of that striking difference between the two countries and their oppositions?
Yeah, it is actually diametrically opposed. There's nothing even close to, you know, yeah. So in fact, it helps to bring a question about when people talk about African elections, because Rwanda now is distinguishing itself as having a unique approach, right. Different, because if you bring in the Kenyan situation now, it is extremely totally different, because you have tensions, you have, you know, so when there's a disappearance or death, you hear that people say that is the result of that tension. Now, right. It is an ethnic alliance that is taking place in Kenya. You know, you have these ethnic groups that building a bloc, they call it NASA, and these ethnic groups build a bloc and they call it Jubilee, and then they go for elections. Right. Of course, the Rwandan constitution does not allow ethnic-based. I think the Kenyan one does not allow either, but they are circumvent by building these coalitions, and because they circumvent the law and they practice ethnicity in spirit, you have the tension that stays there. So in Rwanda's situation, therefore, there is very little room for circumventing the law, especially it's because of the sensitivities to do with the genocide, and how there's a general perception that the political environment leading to genocide was a key contributory factor to the genocide itself. So because of that, the law here is very tight, and the politicians don't have any wiggle room to bring up those undertones of ethnicity. As a result, we don't have such a volatile situation, and I think that it's good for Rwanda. Someone should not say that Kenya should get Rwanda's model and practice it, because it has its own unique circumstances. But it means that Kenyans need to think critically about how to ensure that some of these elements that bring a situation of volatility in their electoral politics is removed. How they do it, they need to think about it.
We still have a few more days. You want to reel in on that?
Definitely. But I want to bring Francine into the conversation. You have mentioned that the private sector federation here in Rwanda is looking abroad, expanding beyond just Rwanda's borders. But if we do look at many of the Western media's pieces and articles that have been coming out in the past 3-4 months, Financial Times, Economist, all of them are pointing a certain direction, painting the incumbent a certain way. Tell me, what does this mean for the credibility of the private sector foundation or federation, or let alone the private sector of Rwanda?
I don't know what I can say, but when you're in business, normally you should not take in consideration what they're talking about, because if we can see what they have been talking about on Africa entirely, and taking in consideration the resources we are having in Africa. It means that where there's resources, there are much talks, you know, as people in media. So for us, we should no longer face that or take in consideration what they are talking about. What we have to do is doing our analysis and try to see what we want as Rwandans. If we are saying that we want to go outside the country, it's because we have realized that we have open rooms or open doors where we are going. We have diplomatic relation with different countries, starting by Africa. Myself, I'm most focusing on Africa because that's where I like business. If you can see like where we have been going, like in Zambia, like in Gabon, now in Benin, where we are having a joint venture between Rwanda and Benin, at Cotonou, it's an opportunity because you're having aircraft going there. If I'm trying to bring something there in Benin, or doing business with people from Benin, it will be easy for me than going to Europe, because all of us used to focus on Europe when you're talking about export. Everyone was trying to go to Belgium, right. But there's a market in Africa. Mm-hmm.
So maybe just to reel in on to the same point, we had the FDI numbers that were raised because you've mentioned the money coming in, the foreign direct investment, $70 million coming from America, from the US, over 2015 boiling over to 2016. So the person who's reading The Economist or the Financial Times is an American, and they're the ones who are pumping in the money. So when they hear that there's the words climate of fear, I mean, it paints a certain way in their relation now to the country. I'm sure Lonzen is itching to talk about this, but we'll block him out for this. So do you think there's a potential climate of fear of investment, leave alone the climate of fear that has been talked about in social media terms?
Myself, I don't feel that fear.
Right.
So when you are talking about fear, I totally disagree
right.
if those people are talking about fear. Maybe they have their own interests, political interests. When you are talking about fear, sometimes you are having your own perception on what you are talking about. Like let's say in Rwanda, when back days we had a lot of people saying that it's not the right time to come and invest in Rwanda, but how many investors are coming? They're hiding themselves and coming in Rwanda. So for us, for me as a private sector member, if I can say, or someone in business, I cannot rely on that because, as I have told you, we are growing. If you are growing, there's people who are there who have been in business years back ago, and who feel stronger than us, but who want to keep that standard alone.
The current infrastructure that has been put by the Rwandan government as well. Which brings me now to my next point, and we'll reel in Lonzen because he's the one who mentioned that word more than once, neoliberalism, where we're seeing within the free market capitalism words, political and economic structures that are owned by the private sector for profit as opposed to by state. Now, most people who are looking into Rwanda and they come in and they say, okay, there's probably a few business entities we can name that are owned by the government, and this helps, issuing out tenders and all. So what do you make of that current constitution of business in Rwanda? Owned by state, owned by the private sector? Speak to us about this.
That's a very good question. Myself, when I was trying to see those businesses. Let me start by businesses made by RPF. They have their own businesses. But starting by Inyange, I remember back days when Inyange started, we were having a lot of milk in the country, but not using that milk. We're having like a quantity of milk, but without having like other production like yogurt, to make sure that we can have that milk exported.
Value addition too.
The value addition. So it was not easy for people to invest in that business for the start point. We remember that we're having some people who are trying to invest in a kind of business, but they feared. Coming back to the fear, sometimes we're having some standard of business where we just want to be in, want to go in the port, want to have like, I have my building where I'll be happy with rent, but we're not having that kind of smartness to start having value addition in our business. Right. So RPF chipping with Inyanje, let's say with Nayeb, I'm having a hotel. We used to have, in our hotel, we used to serve Nescafe. Yet we are having a lot of coffee in the country, but we could not have any investor who could think about having like roasted coffee here and selling beans in hotels. Yet the market was big. But we were importing a lot of Nescafe, serving Nescafe in our hotels. And all European people like myself, I used to have a lot of customers who were saying, how do you serve this, yet you're having coffee? But I remember the first preaching came with, from our president. It was like saying, why don't you add value on your coffee and make sure that you Rwandans are drinking coffee? Because I cannot go in America and drink a cup of coffee at $2 or $3, yet the coffee are coming from Rwanda.
Of course, we've seen across the board in different economies, they have the same conversation where they talk about constitution of government and private sector. Some talk about equity into such businesses, liquidation, buying of shares. But neoliberalism, from your perspective, what do you think of it from a Rwandan standpoint?
The excitement by the international media over Rwanda's election, it's very perplexing. Rwanda, Angola, Kenya, DRC, they are in a year of elections. Yet Rwanda is the one getting most of the attention. It makes you wonder. The other three are large economies, I think top 5 in Africa, size of the economy. Rwanda is not even the top half in terms of size of economy in Africa. Yet it garners that kind of interest to do with foreign direct investment. Don't you think that is a bit, yeah, that means the issue is politics, not economics. Yeah. And what is the politics? It is Rwanda, when you look at those three, Rwanda is not the least managed. It's better governed among those countries, yet it is getting the most attention. So what explains the attention? A sense of purpose. Yeah, the conviction within which Rwanda goes about its governance creates serious threats to international finance, multinational corporations, how they conduct their businesses in the countries where they go. So if all these countries start to behave like Rwanda, we have a serious problem in the neoliberal agenda. Yeah, so we have a very serious struggle that is going on that is concealed in the language of economics, but it's actually domination, and it is a political language that is used to hide the tendency to dominate and exploit. And Rwanda is building a mechanism, a system where the control of this behavior is curtailed. I mean, this behavior is curtailed. So you can't really just come to Rwanda and roam around. You know that. It can't happen.
But is this what you meant in your article when you talked about when they're inducing a climate of fear, donors now have, contractually, they can pull the rug under most of these aspirants or these businesses coming in?
See, what they do now is that when they go all these rallies, you see all these people attending, you have to come up with things like they're being forced to go there. Even the excitement, you say that is being manufactured. Because when you see these people in the hundreds of thousands, these people confer legitimacy to the process. Yet their articles are intended to remove legitimacy of the process. You see, this is in conflict. Yeah, so it just makes sense.
Lonson, sorry to just jump in. This is an argument we've had, me and you, we've argued about this for almost a year. The school of thought of, on one end, a developmental state, on the other end, a democratic state. You've asked the question, why the attention? I think you're looking at it wrong. Why? Because the reason why the international media is so attentive with Rwanda as opposed to Angola or even Congo is because Rwanda has taken a different path, which is maybe in line with the likes of China, Singapore, and Ethiopia. And you're seeing growth north of 7% for the past decade, even before. Now, the likes of, Nigeria, South Africa, are languishing just above 0%, at least for 2016. Now, that leaves you wondering, the question is, should the rest of sub-Saharan Africa move in the direction Rwanda is having because it is working and you're having growth, or should they stay with the democratic state?
Well, you are wrong today as you have been all these years. the thing is this. In fact, there is no contradiction between a developmental state and a democratic state. Though both can be pursued simultaneously. Now, we are talking about a democracy that is substantively of value to the lives of the electorate, the people. And that's really the end of the conversation. When you look at these models that you're talking about, which models offers the best approach, especially in a situation of socio-economic challenges, what approach is conducive for fast-tracking this progress, the transformation of people from very difficult circumstances of poverty into a much more improved lifestyles? Now, the argument that you tend to bring up is, for me, I think that is the democracy, or that I call the democracy of the gallery, where we talk about the freedom of speech, we talk about freedom of expression, we talk about, but for me I'm talking about a substantive democracy that seeks to address the most pressing concerns of the people. And Rwanda's most pressing concerns, I don't know whether you still want to hold your position, but if you tell me that the most pressing concerns of Rwanda is freedom of speech or expression, even though I don't think it should be curtailed, and I don't think it is curtailed, but if you tell me that that is one of the top 3 of the concerns of Rwandans, then I think you don't live here.
No. Lonzen, my question is, we are seeing Rwanda take on a certain path, and it is working. Rwanda, Ethiopia, China, Singapore, right? And the question is, should the rest of sub-Saharan Africa actually embrace this model, because it is proven on the continent, it is proven in Asia, it is proven in Singapore? Is it time for us to revise our school of thought on democracy as it is for the people, of the people, by the people? Is it time for us to go back to the drawing board and take on something else that has worked across the Indian Ocean?
Actually, when you talk about Rwanda's approach, probably the closest example is Ethiopia. And we know Ethiopia is developing at a very drastic pace. Now, not every country should try to copy and paste. In fact, that is the argument. We don't seek to copy and paste from any country's experience. We don't want the American democracy. We don't want the British democracy. We don't have the French democracy. We want a Rwandan democracy. And what does that do? It addresses the needs of the Rwandans. And the objective of whoever designs that democracy should be to address only that objective, nothing else. And every country should do the same.
We've talked about how conducive the environment is, but let's now map it forward. We'd like to now bring you in, Francine. He's mentioned that among the priorities, of course, freedom of expression is nowhere near that, because that, of course, is a different conversation. But top within that priority is the youth. 75% or over that is that demographic in Rwanda. We had the targets that were set here, and of course this has been put in the manifestos in the different candidates. 100 million jobs for Youth Connect Africa was said by 2020, that's in 3 years, when we know the unemployment rate here is almost not manageable. So we'd like to know from the private sector federation, now boiling over to the government, how much does the conversation flow before the government can now come and say, we're going to give 1 million jobs? How are those conversations, how do we come about with those conversations? We still don't get it.
Yeah, I think to be clear, the conversation are made even at the start point, because we are the one implementing, we are the one offering jobs, we are the one empowering them to start their jobs.
Right.
as they will be integrated in business community. So we should try to help them to start. If I can go back a little bit, like 6 months ago, we have done like a small, it was like having some companies together and see how we can get a small amount and try to see how we can empower some young people having some innovation out there up country, because it was like we know that BDF is there, we know that a lot of initiatives are there, but now we can see that Rwandans, young people are having brilliant ideas, but without having capacity to implement those ideas. What myself I'm trying to have, and I have been promoting as a person, right, on my individual basis, it was like seeing how we can put together those people. I'm here, I'm having my money, and there's a young people like you who have a talent and capacity to build like a strong project. Myself, I'm old, but I'm having my money. So if we can be together and have that courtesy to give him a small share in my business, we can grow and make something big. And we have seen those people starting meeting, like having a young people having like an idea, sharing to an investor. Currently, we are having those young people sharing to international investors. But we want to promote in Rwandese investors because we are old. Sometimes we don't have even time to read and to research and to have more. And yet we want to go outside the country. But if I want to go in another country, I have to be innovative. I'm competing with some people who having another background. So I need some young people to come and join me and be together with me with a strong vision, if I can say. But myself will be injecting my money.
Now, if we're to look at the past 7 years, Lonson, what have been the biggest challenges and shortcomings of the Rwanda Patriotic Front?
One particular achievement. I think this particular achievement, I think, underlies all the other achievements, right, and it is accountability. The day that the RPF will falter on the issue of accountability, it will falter as a political party. That is the key success of the RPF. In fact, that is the secret of the RPF. In terms of the weaknesses.
Wait, maybe before you leave, since you talked about accountability, yes, now I would like you to elaborate on this. One of the biggest successes is Rwanda, the national carrier. Yes. But on the business portal that we normally use, Reuters and all these other Bloombergs and all that, the financial statements for Rwanda are not open to the public. So when we talk about accountability, is there any particular reason why we don't have access to some numbers? We have access to some. We only see the fleets or the announcements but not everything?
But every country does that. It identifies areas of, that's what they call classified. Right. So it is within the sovereign right of a state to determine what is classified or not. All right, thank you.
Let's talk about the failures.
Yeah, so the weaknesses of the RPF. In fact, this is where we began. The challenges of political opposition in this country needs to identify these weaknesses I'm going to point out. and
grab a pen and paper.
I'm sure the notebooks are out.
Yes. The execution part of in fact, RPF is praised for service delivery. It tells you something. If its weakness is in the execution, it tells you that it could actually achieve much more if it was optimal in the execution of the programs it has in place. Right. So the programs are right, the programs target the needs, the extent of the execution is a bit lacking. And if they can improve this, it will be very difficult to take power from them. If they can have execution capacity high and accountability, it will be very difficult to take power from the RPF.
Lonson, which program, can you give us one program that is wanting when it comes to execution?
When Habineza talks about introducing the pigs or the goats. What actually he means that Girinka, the Wankawa Papua family, has execution problems, but he's not highlighting these weaknesses in the way that should get him votes. We can go this from one program to another, to another, to another. Mitwell Descent has execution problems. It is up to these political parties that want to wrestle political power from the RPF to actually go from one program to another and highlight these weaknesses and promise to do them better or replace them.
When he's talking that is a weakness to RPF, he mentioned very well, the design is very well done, but the implementation or execution, as he mentioned, but execution is us, people. So
I thought you'd say you as a private sector.
No, Rwandans. There I'm talking as Rwandans.
All right.
They take people like me or Alonso. Is it?
Lonze.
And then they give us power to execute. At the end of the day, when I'm there, I'm not doing what I promised to do. But I don't see as a weakness to RPF. I see as a weakness to myself, who commit to do something and then never deliver what I commit to do.
Right.
So, if we start where I am in private sector, I have told you that we started in 1999. So there I have been elected by others to become the vice chairperson. I'm there to support them. I'm there to advocate for them. If I go there and just sleep, there will be someone who's saying that private sector is not moving. But the challenge is not private sector, it's me. Who are sleeping somewhere there. But the private sector is a very good initiative already in place. But myself as Francine, I'm making it sleeping. So it's the same with Girinka. We have realized what is happening. But the good thing he mentioned, when we are having like the good governance, they're trying to get some solution. But still they are dealing with people. In execution.
So we'll have to toe a very fine line between business and politics, because we normally don't do that on a day-to-day basis. So my final question has to go to you and Lonzen. How different will the conversations be 7 years from now in the business front?
I think we should move very faster than we used to be. I like what he mentioned, like development politics. When we are trying to learn from Singapore, the country, they have a very nice design. Yes, he mentioned that we should apply as Rwandans according to who we are, but we should move faster, because even I can sense that even the world are moving very faster. So I think for the next 7 years, with the help of myself, I'm a member of RPF, so I know that we are gaining. So with the same move, if we can double effort, we can deliver more. Having a better execution, as he mentioned, I can assure that in the next 7 years, we will have a strong and reliable business community in Rwanda.
Fantastic.
Whereby we can automatically cover the entire budget of our country as the target of the country. So that's where I want
Overly ambitious, we'll hold the private sector to account, and of course you as the people leading that. Lonzen, your final thought, 2024, how different will the conversations be from the political perspective?
Yeah, well, it will be whether Kagame will continue or whether he will not continue. And this is what will happen.
So you came with your crystal ball.
Yes, let me use my crystal ball. You're right. The biggest threat to Rwanda is external. So if there is undue external interference, he will continue. If it is if there is no external interference, I think Kagame will step down. Yeah.
Right. He left it very subtle, so we don't have to add anything after that. Lonzen Rugira, researcher in public policy, giving us the final shots there. And of course, Francine Habineza, who's the second vice chairperson for Private Sector Federation. Thank you very much. It's been a quick 1 hour. Arnold, it's the first time you've actually joined me in one of these heated debates. You've been doing it alone. Thank you very much as well, Arnold, Segawa.
Always a pleasure. Wore my lucky tie.
You've been watching the CNBC Africa debates, of course, deliberating on pertinent issues affecting the social scene and now the economic and political scene. The August 4th elections, we're yet to see how exactly the mood shall play out after the elections, but we anticipate, given the landslide, we should be experiencing positivity for the next 7 years. Thank you very much for watching. Keep it CNBC Africa, first in business worldwide.